Good afternoon, Newton. It is Monday. It is 4 o'clock and it is Fablehaven time. So if you guys have been following, we have now read 2 chapters of Fablehaven. If you haven't been following and you've just joined us, you can find those chapters on our YouTube channel, which I will pop in the chat below once I've finished. So if you guys remember, chapter 2 of Fablehaven was actually called Collecting Clues. And Kendra had a set of 3 keys and she was trying to find out what they opened. So she had been around the room, she'd found an extra key and some chocolate, and she still had to find the location of where the last key went. Now, if you remember, she went outside and she looked up at the attic where they were staying, and she noticed that there was a whole other side to the attic which didn't seem to fit their room. They only had 1 window and she saw 2, so she was looking for kind of a secret doorway. If you also remember, there was this really peculiar thing about the mirror that Kendra brought outside. It kept being surrounded by hummingbirds and dragonflies and bees and insects. And if you remember, she turned it face down and the insects flipped it back over again. So I'm not sure if there's something really special about that mirror or something to do with that. But that was kind of what a little summary of the last chapter. At the end of chapter 2, what happened was her brother, Seth, he had run out into the woods to go exploring, and Kendra had found Dale putting out milk for the birds and the bees and the butterflies. And that's where we left it, the last chapter. So I will give a quick summary of the last chapter for you before we go on to the next chapter, which is called The Ivy Shack. So chapter 2, the end of... just to give you a quick recap. Where are you putting that one? Over there. He jerked his head towards the woods. I set a few on the border of the yard every day. He's talking about the milk, remember? Does it spoil? I don't leave it out for long enough. Some days the insects consume all the milk before I collect the pans. Thirsty critters. See you later, Dale. Have you seen your brother here about? I think he's in the house. Is that so? She shrugged. Maybe. Kendra turned and started towards the house. She glanced back as she mounted the stairs to the rear porch. Dale was placing the milk behind a small, round bush. That's where we left it last time. And I think Seth is sneaky in the woods. Chapter 3 is called The Ivy Tower. We are reading Fablehaven by Brandon Mull. Seth pressed through the dense undergrowth until he reached a faint, crooked path, the kind made by animals. Nearby stood a squat, gnarled tree with horny leaves and black bark. Seth examined the leaves for ticks, scrutinizing the camouflage pattern. So far, he had not seen a single tick. Of course, it would probably be the ticks he failed to see that would get him. He hoped the insect repellent that he had sprayed on was helping. Stooping, he collected rocks and built a small pyramid to mark the point where the path had intersected. Finding his way back would probably be no problem, but better safe than sorry. If he took too long, Grandpa might figure out that he had disobeyed the orders. Rummaging in his cereal box, Seth withdrew his compass. An animal track ran northeast. He had set off on an easterly course, but the undergrowth had grown denser as he progressed. A faint trail was a good excuse to veer off slightly off course. It would be much easier going than trying to hack his way through the shrubbery with a pocket knife. He wished he owned a machete. Seth followed the trail. The trees stood fairly close together, diffusing the sunlight into a greenish glow laced with shadows. Seth imagined that the forest would be as black as a cave after nightfall. Something rustled in the bushes. He paused, removing a pair of black plastic binoculars from his cereal box. Scanning the area, he spotted nothing of interest. He proceeded along the trail until an animal emerged from the undergrowth onto the path not 20 feet ahead. It was a round, bristly creature no taller than his knees. A porcupine. The animal stared down the path in his direction with complete confidence. Seth froze. The porcupine was close enough that he could discern the individual quills, slender and sharp. As the animal turned towards him, Seth backed away. Weren't animals supposed to flee from humans? Maybe it had rabies. Or maybe it just hadn't seen him. After all, he was wearing a camouflage shirt. Seth spread his arms wide, stomped a foot on the floor, and growled. The porcupine looked up, twitched his nose, and then turned from the path. Seth listened as it pushed through the foliage away from the trail. He took a deep breath. He had been really scared for a minute there. He could almost feel the quills prickling through his jeans into his leg. It would be pretty hard to conceal his excursion into the woods if he came home looking like a pincushion. Though he dreaded admitting it, he wished Kendra had come. The porcupine would probably have made her scream, and her fear would have increased his bravery. If you remember, Seth is the youngest of the two. He's a little brother. The porcupine... Oh, sorry, did that bit. He could have made fun of her instead of feeling frightened himself. He had never seen a porcupine in the wild before. He was surprised how exposed he felt staring at all those pointy quills. What if he stepped on one in the undergrowth? He looked around. He had come a long way. Of course, finding his way back would be no trick. He just needed to backtrack along the trail and then head west. But if he turned home now, he might never make it back out this way again. Seth continued along the long trail. Some of the trees had moss and lichen growing on them. A few had ivy twisting around their bases. The fat path forked. Checking his compass, Seth saw that one path went northwest, the other went due east. Staying with the same theme, Seth turned east. There began to be more space between the trees, and shrubs grew closer to the ground. Soon he could see much further in all directions, and the forest became a little brighter. To one side of the path, at the limit of his sight, he noticed something abnormal. It looked like a large square of ivy hidden among the trees. The whole point of exploring the woods was to find strange things, so he left the path and walked towards the ivy square. The dense undergrowth came up to his shins, grasping at his ankles with every step. As he tromped towards the square, he realized it was a structure completely overgrown with ivy. It appeared to be a big shed. He stopped and looked more closely. The ivy was thick enough that he could not tell what the shed was made of. He could only see the leafy vines. He walked around to the structure. On the far side, a door stood open. Seth almost cried out when he peered inside. The shed was actually a shack constructed around a large tree stump. Beside the stump, dressed in crude rags, sat a wiry old woman gnawing at the knot of a bristly rope. Shriveled with age, she clutched the rope in bony hands with her knobby knuckles. Her long white hair was matted, and it had a sickly yellowish tint. One of her filmy eyes was terribly bloodshot. She was missing teeth, and there was blood on the knot that she was chewing, apparently from her gums. Her pale arms, bare almost to the shoulder, were thin and wrinkled, with faint blue veins and a few purple scabs. When the woman saw Seth, she dropped the rope immediately, wiping pink saliva from the corners of her meager lips. Supporting herself against the stump, she stood up. He noticed her long feet, the color of ivory, peppered with insect bites. Her grey toenails looked thick with fungus. "Hail, young master. What brings you to my home?" Her voice was crudely melodious and smooth. For a moment, Seth could only stare. Even as he bent, crooked as she was, the woman was tall. She smelled bad. "Do you live out here?" he finally said. "I do. Care to come inside?" "Probably not. I'm just out for a walk." The woman narrowed her eyes. "Strange place for a boy to walk alone." "I like exploring. My grandpa owns this land." "Owns it, you say?" "Does he know you're here?" asked Seth. "Depends who he is." "Stan Sorensen." She grinned. "Oh, he knows." The rope she had chewed laid on the dirt floor. It had one knot beside the other one she had been gnawing. "Why are you biting on the rope?" Seth asked. She eyed him suspiciously. "I don't care for knots." "Are you a hermit?" "You could say that. Come inside and I will brew some tea." "I better not." She looked down at her hands. "Oh, I must look frightful. Let me show you something." She turned and crouched behind the stump. A rat ventured a few steps out of the hole in the corner and out of the shack. When she came back from behind the stump, the rat hid. The old woman sat with her back to the stump. She held a wooden puppet about 9 inches high. It looked primitive, made of entirely dark wood, with no clothes or painted features, just basic human figure with tiny gold hooks serving as joints. The puppet had a stick in its back. The woman set a paddle on her lap. She began making the puppet dance by bobbing the stick and tapping the paddle. There was a musical regularity to the rhythm. "What is that thing?" Seth asked. "A lumberjack," she replied. "Where's his axe?" "Not a lumberjack, a limberjack. A clog doll, a gigger, a dancing Dan, a shuffling Sam. I call him Mendigo. He keeps me company. Come inside and I'll give it you a try." "I better not," he said again. "I don't see how you could live out here like this and not be crazy." "Sometimes people grow weary of society." She sounded a little annoyed. "You happened upon me by accident, out exploring?" "Actually, I'm selling candy bars for my soccer team. It's a good cause." She stared at him. "I've kept my best luck in rich neighborhoods," she started saying. "That was a joke. I'm kidding." Her voice became stern. "You are an impudent young man. And you live in a tree stump." She gave him a measuring glare. "Very well, my arrogant young adventurer. Why not test your courage? Every explorer deserves a chance to prove his mettle." The old woman withdrew into the shack and crouched behind the stump again. She turned to the doorway holding a crude, narrow box made of splintered wood, wire, and long jutting nails. "What's that?" "Place your hand inside the box to prove your valor. Earn a reward." "I'd rather play with the creepy puppet." "Just reach inside and touch the back of the box." She shook it. It rattled a bit. The box was long enough that he would have to reach into it to his elbows in order to touch the back. "Are you a witch?" "A man with a brave tongue should support his words with a courageous action." "It seems like something a witch would do." "Stand by your loose words, young man, or you may not have a pleasant journey home." Seth backed away, watching her closely. "I better get going. Have fun eating your rope." She clucked her tongue. "Such insolence." Her voice remained smooth and calm, but now held a menacing undertone. "Why not step inside? Have some tea." "Next time." Seth moved around the shack, not taking his eyes from the ragged woman in the doorway. She made no move to pursue him. Before he moved out of her sight, the woman raised an arthritic hand with the middle fingers crossed and the others bent awkwardly. Eyes half shut, she appeared to be murmuring something. Then she was out of view. On the far side of the shack, Seth plunged through the tangled undergrowth back to the path, glancing over his shoulder all the way. The woman was not chasing him. Just looking back at the ivory-covered shack made him shiver. The old hag looked so wretched and smelled so foul. There was no way that he was sticking his hand in her weird box. After she had offered the challenge, all he could think about was learning in school how shark teeth angled inward so fish could swim in but not out. He imagined the homemade box was full of nails or broken glass, set at a cruel angle for a similar purpose. Even though the woman was not following him, Seth felt unsafe. Compass in hand, he hurried along the path towards home. Without warning, something struck him on the ear, barely hard enough to sting. A pebble the size of a thimble dropped to the path near his feet. Seth whirled. Somebody had thrown the little stone at him, but he saw nobody. Could the old woman be stealthily following him? She probably knew the woods really well. Another small object bounced off the back of his neck. It was not as hard or heavy as the stone. Turning, he saw another acorn whistling towards him, and he ducked. The acorns and the pebbles had come at him from the opposite sides of the path. What was going on? From above came the sound of wood splitting, and a huge limb fell across the path behind him, a few leaves and twigs swishing against him as it passed. If Seth had been standing 2 or 3 yards back along the path, a branch thicker than his leg would have clubbed him on the head. One look at the heavy limb, and Seth took off down the path at full sprint. He seemed to hear rustling sounds coming from the shrubbery on either side of the scant trail, but he did not slow down to investigate. Something caught a firm hold on his ankle, sending him tumbling to the ground. Sprawled on his belly, a cut on one hand, dirt in his mouth, he heard something rustling through the foliage behind him, and a strange sound that was either laughter or running water. A dry branch snapped like a gunshot. Not looking back for fear of what he might see, Seth scrambled to his feet and dashed along the path. Whatever had tripped him had not been a root or a stone. It had felt like a strong cord stretched across the tail, like a tripwire. He had noticed no such trap previously on the path, but there was no way the old woman could have done it, even if she had started running at the moment he had passed out of her view. Seth raced past the place where the trail forked and sprinted back the way he had come. He scanned the trail ahead for wires and other traps. His breathing became labored, but he did not slow down. The air felt hotter and more humid than it had all day. Sweat began to dampen his forehead and drip down the sides of his face. Seth remained alert for the little pyramid of rocks that would mark where he should leave the path. When he reached the gnarled little tree with the black bark and the thorny leaves, he halted. He remembered the tree. He had noticed it when he intersected the path. Using the tree as a reference, he found the spot where he had built the pyramid of rocks, but the rocks were gone. Leaves crunched behind him off to one side of the trail. Seth glanced at his compass to confirm that he was heading west and ran out into the woods. He had walked this way at a leisurely pace, examining toadstools and unusual rocks as he went. Now he tore through the forest at full speed, undergrowth clawing at his legs, branches wiping against his face and chest. Finally, panting, the energy of his panic wearing thin, he glimpsed a house up ahead through the trees. The sound of pursuit had dwindled to nothing, and as he stepped out onto the yard under the sun, Seth wondered how much of what he had really heard had actually been something chasing him, and how much had been invented by his flustered imagination. The wall opposite the windows in the playroom held several rows of bookshelves. The door to the stairs was built into that wall, and one of bulky freestanding wardrobes was backed up against it. Kendra held a blue book with golden letters. The title was Journal of Secrets. The book was held shut by 3 sturdy clasps, each with a keyhole. The remaining key Grandpa Sorensen had given her fit none of these keyholes, but the gold key she had found in the dollhouse fit the bottom one, so one of the clasps was unlocked. She had found the book while searching the bookshelves for a trigger to a secret passage. Using a stool, Kendra had reached even higher than the shelves, but so far the search had been in vain. There was no sign of a secret door. When she noticed a locked book with intriguing title, she had quit the search in order to test her keys. With the bottom clasp unlocked, Kendra tried to pry up the corner of the book and get a peek, but the cover was too solid and the binding too firm. She needed to find the other keys. She heard somebody stampeding up the stairs and knew it could only be one person. Hurriedly, she shelved the book and pocketed the keys. She didn't want her nosy brother interfering with her puzzle. Seth charged through the door and slammed it behind him. He was flushed and breathing hard. Dirt smeared the knees of his jeans. His face was smudged with sweat and grime. "Oh, you should have come," he sighed, flopping onto his bed. "You're getting the bedspread filthy." "It was freaky," he said. "It was so cool." "What happened?" "I found this path in the woods and met this weird old lady who lived in a shack. I think she's a witch, a real one." "Whatever." He rolled over and looked at her. "I'm serious. You should have seen her. She was a mess." "So are you." "No, like all scabby and gross. She was biting an old rope. She tried to make me stick my hand into some box." "Did you?" "No way. I took off, but she chased me or something. She threw rocks at me and knocked down this big branch. Could have killed me." "You must be pretty bored." "I'm not lying." "I'll ask Grandpa Sorensen if he has homeless people living in the woods," Kendra said. "No! He'll know I broke the rules." "Don't you think he would want to know that a witch built a shack on his property?" "She acted like she knew him. I went pretty far. Maybe I was off his property." "I doubt it. He owns everything for a long ways." Seth leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. "Should have come with me. I could find my way back." "Are you nuts? You just said she tried to kill you." "We should spy on her, find out what she's up to." "If there really is a weird old lady living in the woods, you should tell Grandpa so that he can call the police." Seth sat up. "Okay, never mind. I made it up. Feel better?" Kendra narrowed her eyes. "I found something else cool," Seth said. "Have you seen the treehouse?" "No." "Want me to show you?" "Is it in the yard?" "Yes, on the edge." "Okay." Kendra followed Seth outside and across the lawn. Sure enough, in the corner of the yard opposite the barn, there was a light blue playhouse up in a thick tree. It was situated on the back side of the tree, making it hard to see from most of the yard. The paint was peeling a little, but the little house had shingles on the roof and curtains in the windows. Boards had been nailed to the tree to form a ladder. Seth went up first. The rungs led to a trap door, which he pushed open. Kendra climbed up after him. Inside, the treehouse felt bigger than it looked from the ground. There was a little table with 4 chairs. The pieces to a jigsaw puzzle were spread out on the table. Only a couple had been fit together. "See? Not bad," Seth said. "I started that puzzle." "It's beautiful. You must be gifted." "I didn't work on it long." "Did you even find the corners?" "No. That's the first thing you do." She sat down and started looking for corner pieces. Seth took a seat and helped. You never liked puzzles, Kendra said. It's more fun doing them in a treehouse, if you say so. Seth found a corner piece and set it aside. Think Grandpa would let me move in here? You're a weirdo. I'd only need a sleeping bag, he said. You'd get freaked out once it was late. No way. The witch might come get you. Instead of responding, he started looking more intently for corner pieces. Kendra could tell that the comment had gotten to him. She decided not to tease him any further. The fact that he seemed scared of the lady he had met in the woods legitimized his story a lot. Seth had never scared easily. This was a kid who had jumped off the roof under the misguided assumption that a garbage bag would work like a parachute. The kid who had put the head of a live snake in his mouth for a dare. They found the corners and finished most of the perimeter of the puzzle by the time they heard Lena calling them for dinner. The end. That was freaky, huh? Oh, that old lady. I know she's going to come back in the story somewhere. I'm trying to keep a few chapters ahead, and I haven't seen her come back yet, but I know she will. I'm using this beautiful bookmark that was given to the staff by one of our patrons, so thank you very much. It's beautiful and I love it, so I'm using it for this book. Chapter 4 is called The Hidden Pond, and we will be back on Monday with The Hidden Pond. If you have missed any of the other chapters, check them out on our YouTube channel. I will also be back on Tuesday, tomorrow actually at 10 a.m. with preschool stories. So we will see you then. Enjoy this gorgeous weather. It's going to be a beautiful week, so get out, enjoy the sun, and take care. Bye guys.